everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here and to have the opportunity to give you this talk about the place of animal products in more sustainable diets. So personally, I'm a nutritionist. I'm from the field of public health and nutrition, so I will give that perspective of human nutrition. So first of all, I would like to start to come back to this FAO definition from 2010 of the sustainable diet concept. And this definition says that sustainable diets must be nutritionally adequate, safe and healthy, culturally acceptable, and this is very, very important because if they are not acceptable, they will not be adopted, and they will not. We don't have sustainable diets, and accessible, economically fair and affordable, but not only environmental, respectful of biodiversity and ecosystems. So, in my opinion, I stick to this definition of the FAO, and for me, the sustainable diet concept is including all these four dimensions and the respect of all these four dimensions, not only the environment. So I come back to this definition also because it is mainly the basis of most studies on sustainable diets from the nutrition and health, public health sector research. So starting with the nutrition dimension, obviously we are eating food, but we need energy and nutrients, and not only proteins or amino acids. We need fiber, vitamins, a lot of vitamins, minerals, and essential fatty acids, and we need to get them without excess in some nutrients that have to be limited in a healthy diet, such as sodium, salt, and sugar, sugar, and some fatty acids. So nutritional adequacy is really achieved when all those needs are covered without deficiency, with the nutrient to be favored, and without excess in the nutrient to be limited. So we are eating combination of foods. A diet is a combination of food that provide our organism with the calories and the nutrients it needs. So nutritional adequacy is achieved by eating combination of foods that can have very different nutritional profile. So it is why dietary diversity is so important for preventing health. You can't eat only one kind of food because it will not provide you the nutrients you will need in the good quantities. So about sustainable diets in public health and nutrition studies, I just show you this slide to give you an idea of the metrics we are conducting. So for the data, obviously we have data on nutrition, such as the nutrient content of food, nutrient-based recommendations for each nutrient, and also we rely on scoring for scoring the nutritional quality of diets. For the cultural dimension, we mainly rely on observed dietary intakes and what people eat actually and what is commonly consumed, because we assume that that is culturally acceptable. For the economic dimension, it is quite difficult. We can have data on price, but it is not so easy to get, and it is even more difficult to know what is a fair price for the producer. We can also have data on the budget for food, And for the environment, more and more, now we can have access to several kind of data on different metrics, but just 10 or 12 years before, we only had the greenhouse gas emission data to start our studies. So to look at the sustainable diets in our studies in nutrition and public health, we need to compile all those different metrics coming from different sources and put them in single databases. In a paper we published last year with colleagues, we tried to categorize the kind of methods that are used in public health and nutrition studies to explore diet sustainability. Broadly, there is four main methods that are used. The first one is to design theoretical diets based on a priori scenarios. For instance, theoretical diets where meat is replaced by plant, or theoretical diets that meet some guidelines, for instance, the Mediterranean Pyramid, or the food-based dietary guideline from that or that country, or the Eat-Lancet recommendations. The second kind of method is to try to describe the sustainability characteristics of existing diets. So, for instance, we classify diets by a given nutritional quality score or by greenhouse gas emission level and so on, and we look at the relationship with other characteristics. The third approach is to try to identify the best existing diets in terms of sustainability in a lot of existing diets in a population. So this also is called the positive deviance approach, because we are looking at diets that are different from others, but positively different. The fourth and last approach is the use of mathematical optimization of diets under sustainability constraints, though the aim is to design theoretical diets, but without a priori, or by limiting a maximum the a priori decision that we will make. So I will give you an example of each kind of approach and present their strengths and weakness. So approach one, designing theoretical diets based on a priori scenario. An example very often see is that studies that replaced meat by plant. So in that study by Springman and collaborators in the Lancet Planetary Health, they replaced animal products by totally 100% by plant, or 75% or 50% of 25% of animal products were replaced by plant. And the first result was, in terms of environmental impact, was that most environmental metrics improved, but water deteriorated, especially in the totally vegan scenario. They also looked at the nutritional characteristics, and they published that, in fact, some nutrients were not adequate in the scenario that get too low amount of animal products. In addition, they just look at some nutrients, but for instance, very important nutrients such as iodine, vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids were not assessed. And also, they didn't look at sugar and sodium. So the advantage of this first approach is that it is quite simple. It is easy to communicate. So, okay, you have to change 25% of your meat to eat and to eat more plant-based. But there is main limitations, and in particular, there is no consideration of cultural acceptability because it is totally a priori, and improved sustainability is not ensured. As you can see in this example, water impact was not good, and nutritional adequacy was not ensured. The second approach is very classical in epidemiological studies. We collect data on the diet people eat, and we looked at different variables and characteristics of those diets. And in this approach, existing diets are thus classified by a given one metric, one variable. This is what we did 10 years ago with the French adult diets. And we looked at the distribution of greenhouse gas emissions of the French adult diets in the population. And we were surprised at that time to see that there was quite a huge variability, inter-individual variability, with women who had an impact that was lower. It was greenhouse gas emission, lower greenhouse gas emission than the diet of men. So we wanted to know what were the determinant of this variability. Was it quantity? Was it quality? And obviously we found rapidly that quantity is a main determinant of this variability. As you can see here, the correlation of quantities eaten with the level of dietary greenhouse gas emission is very high, and the correlation between energy intakes and greenhouse gas emission is even higher. So this said that we need to don't forget that the first lever for reducing the environmental impact of our diet is certainly to buy less, to waste less, and just eat what we need. And this is entirely consistent with public health messages to fight overweight and obesity, and also it helps to keep the food budget under control if you don't waste and if you don't eat what you don't need to eat. But we also looked at the quality determinant, and we wanted to correlate several scores of nutritional quality of the diets and the level of dietary greenhouse gas emission in the diet of the French adults. So we used three scores. One is a score of good nutritional quality, a score of nutritional adequacy. The name is mean adequacy ratio. And the two others are scores of bad nutritional quality, because one is a mean excess ratio. It represents the quantity of fat, sugar, and salt that we have in the diet in relation to the recommendations, and also energy density, because the more diet is dense in calorie, the less it is healthy in general. So, as you can see, the correlation of those three indexes with dietary quality was quite low, much lower than the correlation with the quantities eaten. So the massive effect is an effect of quantity, but there is also an effect of the quality. The surprise again was that it was not in the expected way. We, at that time, expected that better, healthier, adequate diet would be less impacting in terms of greenhouse gas emission, but it was not the case, because as you can see, there was a positive correlation between the good nutritional quality index and greenhouse gas emission. So we wanted to explain that, to understand that, and it can be seen as quite simply by plotting the by ranking food groups according to their greenhouse gas emission levels. So here it is expressed per 100 kilocal. The functional unit is not gram but kilocalories. And as you can see, and we know that, all plant-based foods have a very low impact, okay? But also, in these plant-based foods, we have, you can see, that we have products that are not healthy when they are consumed in excess. Sweet products, refined cereals, vegetable oils. So this is exactly why the relationship between nutritional quality and greenhouse gas emission was not in the expected direction, because the more you have those products in a diet, the less healthy it is, and also the less impacting it is. In addition, the more impacting among the plant-based products are fruit and vegetables. As you can see, when they are expressed per 100 kilocalories, they are as expensive as dairy products. And given that it is very important for health to have important amount of fruit vegetable in diets, it also explains why the correlation was not in the expected direction. So just one slide about this, just to have in mind that very often we have two simplistic way of thinking about plant and health. As you can see here on that slide, all those foods are vegan. They are cheap, but they are very unhealthy when they are consumed in excess or without other products. And this is true of all those food and all food that are made, all products that are made with white flour, sugar, and vegetable oils. So about approach 2, what we can see is that the advantage is that there is a better consideration of cultural acceptability because we are looking at existing diets. There is a better understanding of trade-offs between sustainability dimension. It can help to understand those trade-offs. But the limitations is that when you improve one sustainability dimension, for instance, reducing greenhouse gas emission, you will not improve the other dimension. So improving sustainability can't be ensured with unidimensional approaches because sustainability is intrinsically a multidimensional concept, as it was said previously, obviously. So the third approach is try to identify within a given population the best existing diets in terms of several sustainability criteria. We did that for the French diet and then for several European countries. So for the given population, we have the diets that are consumed by people. We can calculate nutritional quality scores. We can calculate environmental impact. And thus, we can have a look at the diets that combine several aspects of sustainability here to have a good nutritional quality and a low environmental impact. We found that 20% of self-selected diets were identified as positive deviant. Their greenhouse gas emissions were reduced by 20% versus the mean. Those people eat less and they eat differently. Again, a question of quantity and a question of quality. So they eat minus 200 kilocalories versus the mean. And in terms of quality, in terms of balance between food groups, it was not so different. As you can see, all the food groups were present. They were in the positive diets. But there was a slighter amount of plant-based products. There were a lower amount of meat, fish, and eggs, in particular due to the reduction of meat, but meat is still present. No difference for dairy products, and a lower cost for the both reasons, because the lower quantity and the lower quantity of meat, because meat is an expensive product in our diet. In the French diet, meat is 20% of the food budget of the French. So we reproduced this approach for 5 European countries, and the results were confirmed. What was confirmed is that to improve sustainability, exclusion of entire categories of food is not a necessity. Again, all the categories, food categories, were present in the diet of the positive deviants. But there is a need to rebalance plant-based product versus animal-based product consumption. So for approach 3, it is interesting because cultural acceptability is ensured. We can have improvement of several sustainability criteria simultaneously, but the magnitude of the improvement might be too small because we are only on what is done today, and we don't know what can be done tomorrow. So to have a look at what can be done tomorrow, the last approach, that is designing a theoretical diet without a priori, is very useful. I think that most probably you know this technique. Starting from an observed diet, we can design a model diet that fulfill a list of constraints on nutrition, environment, and acceptability and realism, and end up with a new model diet that is better given the constraint we entered in the model. So using that approach in the French diet, we found that until 30 to 40% greenhouse gas emission reduction is compatible with nutritional adequacy by changing only the quantities of 2 food groups. There were an important fruit and vegetable increase and a moderate decrease of the whole group of meat, fish, poultry, and eggs. I will skip this. I will also skip this. Perhaps I will go to that one. The mathematical optimization is very useful in nutrition to answer complex questions and to answer important questions. In last year, in the Journal of Nutrition, we published a paper with Jean-Louis Perrault, who is here, to ask the question, what is the minimum quantity of protein in a diet that is compatible with the achievement of all other nutrient recommendations other than proteins? This was the first question. We end up with around 50, 60 grams of protein per day. So this is approximately the protein needs, but this was not for proteins themselves, but because proteins are associated in food with very important nutrients, and to get those important nutrients in the good quantities, you need to have at least 50 to 60 grams of proteins. The second question was, what is the minimum percentage of animal proteins in total proteins that is compatible again with the compliance with the recommended intakes of non-protein nutrients at no extra cost and without fortified food or supplements? And we end up with around 50%, more or less, depending on the age and the sex of the population. Why is this? Because animal protein sources are sources of many other essential nutrients, some which are not found or not sufficiently bioavailable in plant protein source, especially vitamin B12, iodine, iron, zinc, vitamin D, and long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. So this approach is very interesting because it helps to have a very good understanding of trade-offs between sustainability dimensions. It helps to meet all targets simultaneously. It is the only approach able to ensure nutritional adequacy, and it can be applied to different kinds of dietary data. You can have it. You can have a model for meals, for population diet, for individual diets. But the limitation is that when targets constraints are too severe or incompatible, there is no solution or very unrealistic solution. And also, because they are theoretical diets, there is deviation from existing diets, and acceptability may not be ensured. So I will skip to go, because I know that the time is to do the conclusions. So the conclusion of all the common conclusions of main studies using the different methods I present today is that nutritional quality and environmental impact in diets are not spontaneously aligned. It is possible to reduce environmental impact while improving nutritional quality, and optimization is very useful to do that. Meat should be reduced, but for the Global North study only. In general, more sustainable diets are less expensive because meats represent the largest share of the food budget. As I said, in France, it is 20% of our budget, whatever the socioeconomic status. But entire categories of food don't need to be eliminated. And what is important, again, is diversity and balance between animal and plant-based products, because all provide nutrients that are essential for health. So hopefully, these messages are well-known messages about diversity and moderation that we nutritionists are saying for a long time, and they are still relevant for sustainable diets, so it is quite good news. Thank you very much for your attention.